this video, we're going to go over how to control and operate the Datavideo PTC-140 from the RMC-180 Mark II camera controller. So first, you'll want to connect the PTC-140 to the RMC-180 Mark II using an Ethernet cable connected using the RS-422 port on the back of the PTC-140. Connect that to either channel A, B, C, or D on the back of the RMC-180 Mark II camera controller, depending on your setup. So we've connected our camera to channel A. First, you'll see the layout of the RMC-180 Mark II camera controller. If this looks familiar, you may recognize the layout from the RMC-180 camera controller, but there were a few key differences. Most notably, the new gain controls for your manual white balance for precisely painting the white balance of your camera. Also, there is another camera OSD menu button and a dedicated shutter button. First, let's go over how to change the resolution of the PTC-140 using the RMC-180 camera controller. Press down on the menu button and scroll right to go to function 4, which is video format, and then press the button once again. You'll see we have 1080 5994 as the resolution. You can also choose between 50 frames per second in 1080 or 60p in 1080. Also 50i, 5994, 60i, 25p, 1080 at 2997, 1080p 30, 720p 50, 720p 5994, and then finally 720p 60. So set the resolution to what you desire or what works best with your video switcher. I'm going to choose 1080p 60. To choose the resolution, press down on the menu button and then press down once again to execute. This will reset your camera. When your camera is done resetting, you can scroll over to exit on the RMC-180 and press down on the menu button once again. Next, let's go over how to change the white balance. So you'll see in our display we have a colorful piñata. I have one push white balance enabled, but I can also apply an auto white balance feature. Now our auto white balance didn't happen to work with the scene as you see here. However, if I pan over to the right and show a solid white background, now the auto white balance is kicked in and it's showing the proper white balanced color temperature. And if I pan to the left, once again, it's locking on to parts of the piñata and the white balance looks a little off. So if you happen to have a white background or a white card handy on set, go ahead and zoom into a region that is only white and then hold down on the one push auto button. Your camera will then begin calculating and locking in on the white balance. And when it's finished, now the white balance stays consistent. You also have the option to manually white balance. And this would take advantage of the red gain and blue gain buttons, which double up for controlling on the menu. However, this is a more advanced feature and one push white balance is what I would recommend. Next, let's go over how to save camera presets. You'll see in the bottom right of the camera controller, there are 4 camera presets. Since we're using channel A, we're only going to set on channel A presets. So let's go ahead and let's save this particular shot as the first preset on channel A. To do that, press the store button. You'll see that all the buttons are now blinking. I want to set it to the first. Press down on that, and now this is saved. So let's go ahead and find a second shot. I'm going to pan down to this figure here. All right, our focus has locked in. Okay, so I'm going to hit store. and I'm going to hit the second preset. Now I'm going to go back over to the piñata, and we're going to do an extreme close-up as much as the camera can zoom in without losing focus. This is pretty close to the camera. Okay, here we go. I'm going to save this as my third shot. And then finally, I'll save a shot here on a stuffed animal of Baby Groot. All right, so let's go ahead and recall presets. So to recall presets, simply press any of the buttons that you just saved. So let's go ahead and recall 1. There's our first shot. Let's recall 2. That's our second shot. Let's recall 3. Third, and finally D. There you go. We saved 4 camera presets on our small scene here. All right, next let's go over how to use the focus, iris, and shutter. So you'll see we have a focus wheel, and right now the focus button is not illuminated. So when the focus button is not illuminated, it's on autofocus. You'll see we zoom into our scene and the focus automatically sets. So what if I want to do manual focus? We press down and now it's illuminated. Now I can use the focus wheel to adjust my focus. So if I have something in the background I want to focus on in the foreground is something I don't want focus, I'll focus to the right, and then to come back to the front of the camera, I move the wheel to the left. And that looks perfect. So to keep the focus on the same setting, you can keep the button illuminated. Iris is much the same thing. So right now the iris button is illuminated. If I press it once again here, now it's on auto iris. If I press it again, now I'm back to what my setting was for the manual iris. To change the iris, it can move down. And this is actually changing the aperture of the camera, the f-stops. So if I'm wide open and it won't go anymore, it's probably f1.8. Next is a shutter. So in the menu settings, I have the shutter speed set to 1/120. And you'll always want to stay at double the shutter speed for your frame rate. So if I'm shooting at 60 frames per second, I want my shutter speed at 120. If I'm shooting at 30 frames, I want my shutter speed at 60. So if I manipulate the shutter, I have automatic shutter or I can have manual shutter. And now I could increase or decrease my shutter speed. If your shutter speed is set too high, your images will look a little choppy and not as crisp. If your shutter speed is set too low, say I'm shooting at 1/30 when my frame rate is 60 frames per second, you'll see ghosting and moving images. So it's best to just leave the shutter on automatic. Next, you'll see the zoom controls. We have fast, middle, and slow. This controls how fast we zoom in and out. Remember my manual focus was on, so I now turned on autofocus once again. So if we want to go slow, we can pan really slow and tilt up really slow and also zoom really slow. By the way, I'm zooming by twisting the knob on the RMC-180 camera controller to the right and left to zoom in and out. So there's a very, very, very slow pan, an extreme zoom of this very small piñata. For reference, this is my hand picking it up. That is a very small piñata. And if I go to fast, now I'm moving fast. So the lock button will set so that if you accidentally touch the joystick, that the camera will not be moved. However, you can still recall presets when it's in lock. So if you're on a production and you only want to use your camera presets, you can always set the lock button on, and if you accidentally touch the joystick, then you'll